What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the early read recording Wednesday. So this is going to go up on Thursday. So a little dated. The NBA playoff schedule has been a little tricky to get some good pods out there, but we're going to do the best we can. Only one game tonight, Knicks, Pacers. So to go through everything we're seeing in the postseason, talk a little my guy, not my guy, and some playoff handicapping process. We're on Kirk Evans at Kirk Evans 0 on Twitter. He's an NBA bettor, does some work for the Hammer Network. The board is the show he's a member of as well. Kirk, appreciate you taking the time, man. How's it going?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So overall, before I ask you anything, just how's your postseason going? You know, you had probably your priors coming into it. We're into the second round. Things are obviously happening that I think to some are a surprise, maybe not to you. How's your overall process and your results been thus far in the postseason?
Yeah, playoffs have been good. By the time the second round comes around, I definitely have slowed down my betting, especially I'm getting ready for the W season. So the game-to-game betting is maybe a little less, but everything's been good. If you've ever seen my Twitter, I'm touting Boston pretty often, and right now things are going good for the Celtics, so that's going well. But yeah, everything's been good. I think it's been a great playoff. Some injuries, but super intense. I really like the lower foul calls. I think the game's been great, so it's been awesome to watch.
So that I'll start there. But so the fouls or the lack thereof of fouls, the seismic shift in officiating at around the All-Star break, and it's been spoken about by someone who's very in the weeds and betting at a high level like yourself. Did you put a serious emphasis going into the postseason, like a team like Minnesota, who has a lot of wing depth, a lot of physicality, against a team like Denver, who's maybe a little bit more finesse? Is that an edge you were seeing ahead of time? Because obviously now everybody's talking about it. It's all anyone can talk about. But is that something that as the season was progressing, and this is more of like a Minnesota-Denver conversation, but is that something you saw and you're like, oh, this is going to be super impactful and this is going to maybe tip the scales and maybe what people haven't been looking at big picture-wise?
I wish I did, but my
Same.
perspective was more so I wasn't sure on how it was going to go because we saw the foul decrease around the All-Star break, and we knew it was going to be a significant question going into the playoffs. But I thought logically you could look at it either way. Like, oh, fouls are already down. They're going to come down even more, and the physicality is going to go up even more. But I actually thought you could pretty easily look at it the other way of they've already stopped calling as many fouls. So we've kind of hit the equilibrium of where they're going to allow the game to be. And the drop off between physicality from the regular season to the playoffs is actually going to be lower. So I thought it could have went either way. So I wasn't really confident to take one of those sides because I just wasn't sure really which way it was going to go.
Yeah, and I think another thing, because I've seen this argument as well in the same vein, is the lack of consistency across games. And I was thinking in my head, I think the lack of consistency, because we're seeing a lot of, if you want to talk about like the Knicks Pacers game, some of the calls there, even last night's Thunder Mavericks game was called very differently. That's game one, whereas game two of the Nuggets Timberwolves game was called, they were letting them play out there. I think the fact that this was a mid-season change is leading to a lot more volatility in how the games are being played or how they're being officiated because there wasn't the off-season referee, orientation. Hey, we're doing this year. I think you're seeing referees kind of caught in the crosshairs of this because they don't even know necessarily what the best practices are because there's less reps and less of a mandate on them and less cohesiveness across the league. So I do think game to game, you're seeing a lot of differences in how the games are being called as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was actually about to say something in a similar vein. I think the NBA kind of got away with this shift. I think people look at it as, oh, they're calling less fouls, so that's kind of fair for everyone. I actually don't agree with that at all. I think, teams play differently. If you're a more finesse team, they're being allowed less fouls. It's pretty clearly a disadvantage for you. But even if it was fair for everyone, I think changing something in the middle of the season and not telling anyone, like, I speak to people in the league. I know people in the league. When I saw a dramatic shift coming out of the All-Star break, I messaged people in the league and said, are you seeing this? Like, what's going on? They were like, no, we haven't heard anything. We haven't noticed anything. And then, of course, Silver admitted 2 months later that he went to the refs and told them, stop calling as many fouls. So I think overall, even though I like it for the league, I think it's
Mm.
good that there are less fouls. I think pretty universally, it's the biggest gripe of NBA fans of how many fouls. Even Jalen Brunson or Shea still like they really look to draw fouls, and it's not nearly as fun to watch as when a free flowing game is going. But at the end of the day, I think it's kind of unreasonable to make a dramatic shift. And I agree with you that the players know less of what a foul is, so you can see them being more upset, which is reasonable.
Mm.
And yeah, it probably is officiated worse game to game because it's harder for a ref to make a mid-season adjustment of what a foul is versus, like you said, they have ref camps in the offseason and they really have things that they specify on. They show them in video. It was just pretty bush league, if I'm being honest, to randomly change how many fouls because they were afraid. I think everything this NBA season comes down to the new TV deal that's coming in next year. So the NBA is just doing everything they can to make the product as enjoyable as they can, but they've kind of taken weird steps and done things that I don't think were really legitimate.
I also think, to a point, the fact that they're experimenting with different things and getting at least like a small data set. So when they do go to these negotiations, they say, hey, we're trying this, we're doing this, we could go back to this. Like, it's giving a more broader scope of what the NBA can do and how they could change the game to potential TV partners. But I agree with you 100%. So haven't done this in a few episodes. We're going to bring it back. So Kirk, I like to do my guy, not my guy. Very, very simple for those that haven't listened. It's one player, one coach, one anybody that you want to shout out that kind of hooked you up, you think deserves a little shine. And then not my guy is kind of you're allowed to, throw some shit at anybody who you think cost you some money along the way. So I'll go first. My guy, Obi Toppin, who, if you told me a year ago I'd be shouting out Obi Toppin, I'd be a little surprised because I didn't think he was very good. But new role, a little bit more of a spark plug role. He's been going over his points prop every, I believe it's 4 or 5 straight games now. I've been riding it last 4 games. Obviously, the through the legs dunk, I think in a series against the Knicks, which we're going to talk about in a sec, he's incredibly impactful against the team that traded him, can bring that energy off the bench, play fast tempo. So Obi Toppin, my guy of the week. He's been, making me money and, putting on a product.
Got you. I think I interpreted my guy, not my guy, a little differently, but I'm gonna go with it. I thought it was more like a guy you really like or don't think's getting enough shine.
You can do any. There's no serious protocol on the my guy, not my guy. It's more of a way to just review what you've been seeing and have it that way. So you can go with whatever you feel.
Yeah. So I'm going my guy, Tom Thibodeau. I think there's a perception of Tom Thibodeau of kind of 6 years ago, this anti-analytics coach who, isn't really someone who shifts his opinions, but he's been maybe the best coach in the league the last 3 years. He won a coach of the year, and he's taken a not that talented Knicks team to now probably a conference finals. They've been really good in the regular season. And I think one thing that just really doesn't get talked about is they've shifted their focus. They play basketball to get offensive rebounds. And I don't think I've ever seen a team do that in my NBA viewership. It was very in 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that offensive rebounds aren't as valuable. Just get back on D. Transition defense is more important than offensive rebounds. The Knicks went completely against that. I've heard many beat reporters for the Knicks say, yeah, the Knicks specifically have their shot chart designed for shots that are more likely to be offensive rebounded. And that's super analytical. That's kind of like Moneyball stuff of thinking about, okay, you're actually adding, 0.3 points per possession, even if you're losing some efficiency on the first shot, you're actually gaining that back on the likelihood of there being an offensive rebound. And I think if Tom Thibodeau was Tom something else and was a 33-year-old coach, he'd be looked at as some analytical wizard for thinking of this, but he kind of just doesn't get that love because people kind of think they know who he is, but I actually just don't think that's true.
I think it's more like the evolution of Tibbs, because he still does like the similar stuff that what he was doing with Chicago, where he's playing Josh Hart every minute of the game. It's more like the subtle evolution of like the grinded out physical style in a modern NBA, because it like has like that analytical spin on it. It has the smarts, but it's like it's not as like offensive rebounding just isn't as sexy as like, all right, well, we're going to shoot 53s, like offensive rebounding. It's like the anti 3-pointer basically, but I agree with you 100%. And we're going to talk Knicks Pacers in just a little bit. I feel bad sticking on Knicks Pacers, but not my guy. Tyrese Halliburton, someone that I've been in camp Halliburton. I think he's really good. Obviously, start to the year was playing at an all NBA level. The hamstring injury, now it seems like it's stemmed to the back injury. And game one was a nightmare for him. No shots, no assists, no rebounds in the fourth quarter. Only 6 field goal attempts overall. I mean, the fact that the Pacers were in this game despite getting a 0 from Halliburton for the most part. He had a few nice passes, but for the most part, a 0. I think that spells well for the Pacers. But I mean, this has not been a good postseason in his first real run at it. And, you want to be in these superstar conversations. You play like shit, people are going to talk about you right after. And I thought that was pretty disheartening. I mean, he didn't go by anybody. Clearly the back is an issue. So not my guy, Tyrese Halliburton. Welcome to the dialogue, my man. This is how it works.
Yeah, no, I honestly think you're being nice to Tyrese Halliburton. I think Tyrese Halliburton, I don't want to say that hamstring injury was good, because obviously it did really impact him. But I don't think we've ever seen a all NBA, people were talking about him first, second team all NBA for a lot of the year, get this much of a pass for an injury that happened, 3 months ago. I don't know how much that's impacting him. I'm sure it's somewhat, but I think if you're saying, oh yeah, this is all that hamstring, that back, I think you're probably giving him too much credit. I think maybe we overrated him a bit. As a consensus, he's really struggled. And, if this were Jason Tatum, who had a hamstring injury 3 months ago, people would not care at all about that hamstring injury. They would be killing him. So, I think he just kind of needs to be better. He's supposed to be the best player on the team, and he just hasn't been good.
Wait, TJ McConnell outplayed him on Monday. I mean, it was a disaster. Watching the game, I don't think he got by like a single soul. DiVincenzo had him in jail. Even on the switches, he didn't want to go past Hardenstein. He was just like, all right, like he's a great passer, so like it's part of his game. But still, I mean, gotta be able to take a 7-footer like Hardenstein off the dribble and get a few buckets around the rim. I mean, you're making life for the Pacers so much harder when you're a 0 out there and you're kind of the whole offense.
For sure. And he's just not that strong of a driver, never has been, not that good of a finisher. Also, what killed me was there were 2 plays where it was kind of a one-on-one fast break. I think one was DiVincenzo. I'm not sure who the other one, where Halliburton's the last guy under the rim. Just no.
Oh, he did like the behind the back pass. I know exactly what player you're talking about.
No. I'm saying he's the defender under the rim.
Okay.
And look, obviously it's not like Tyrese Halliburton's really going to block that shot, but give a hard foul. He just runs under the rim and let these guys get a layup. It's the playoffs, play with a little physicality. But yeah, shout out to my guy Tibbs again. Really smart to be willing to switch Hardenstein. I think I saw a stat, the Knicks were like 29th in switch frequency in the regular season. They don't like to switch, but sign of a good coach. If you see an adjustment that's good, go with it early in the series. Don't wait until you have to put it in. Keep going. So yeah, I think Halliburton's a good, not my guy. I think he probably hasn't gotten enough shit that he deserves.
All right, so what do you got? Now I'm interested to see who your not my guy is based on how you interpreted the first one. But let's say it.
I think he's been not my guy for a long time. I'm going to go Josh Giddey.
Oh, okay. This is great. I was going to talk about him later. Great. Let's hear it.
He's just not really, an additive player, especially for a good team. Like, some of it's not his fault that he just kind of happened to be put on this incredible team. And pretty clearly he's best with the ball in his hands as a passer. But he's taken no strides. He's a pretty bad shooter still. He's a really bad driver. He never gets to the rim. So he's just really not additive for this team. I think there are going to be games in the playoffs where he plays like 7 minutes. I'm not sure how many minutes he played last night, but he definitely got benched at a point. He's just not the guy people thought he was.
Yeah, because I was going to talk about this when we talk Thunder Mavs, because so Giddey -7 in 16 minutes. He was replaced by the likes of Isaiah Joe, who played 14 minutes plus 12, Kason Wallace, 22 minutes plus 13, Aaron Wiggins, 22 minutes plus 18. So Giddey, I believe, was the only guy outside of garbage time to be a negative.
Yeah. I'm looking
Yeah.
right now. Gordon Hayward was a -1 in 7 minutes, and then Giddey. Like Shea was a +21, Chet a +18. Like
I also don't think this matchup suits him very well because you're letting the Mavs off the hook, who have a guy like Luka that they could just stick on Giddey. And if Giddey's going to shoot threes, he's been better from three, but it just seems like they don't. That's not what the Thunder want to do anyway. So it just doesn't seem. It seems like he's too specialized as a player, if that's the right word. He's too niche as a player, where he only can work in certain matchups. And this Mavs one just doesn't really seem like one where you could put out an Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah Joe, a Kason Wallace, who can make it up on the defensive end, but also space the floor pretty well.
No, I totally agree. It's a hard position when your skill is being good with the ball, but you're worse with the ball than other guys on your team. He's obviously a worse playmaker, initiator than Jalen or Shea. So why would you give Giddey possessions when you're just kind of lowering your ceiling? But then when he's off the ball, he's terrible. So he's a bad defender. So he's just not really good. I actually am kind of curious what happens with him. Like, I think another team would give him a chance. I think he's kind of a floor raiser. I think he'd be fine on a bad team, but I think he's going to want a lot of money. I think this offseason he's extension eligible. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, but I don't think he carries much value around the league. Like, I don't think you're getting anything close to a premium first, maybe a heavily protected first, but he might be just a guy they kind of dump.
Yeah, especially the Thunder, they have so many options. As a Nets fan, there are like Ben Simmons like similarities to his game. He's obviously he's not as good of a defender as Ben Simmons, but on offense, there are some Ben Simmons like qualities where he could kind of run with four shooters, but when it comes playoff time, he kind of doesn't have a spot on the floor.
Yeah, I think if you built around Josh Giddey, you could come up with a fine team. But like, who wants to build around Josh Giddey to come up with a fine team? It's just if you're just not really at that elite level of creation, and you don't do the other things well, you're just kind of misplaced in the NBA today.
Yeah, agreed. All right, let's talk some of these series here. So we're gonna start. I'm gonna go in chronological order. So we're gonna talk Pacers-Knicks. Game 1 is tonight. So when you're listening to this, Game 2 will have happened already. So maybe we won't go too as in depth. Maybe we'll stay a little bit more big picture idea stuff. But I thought, so my thesis going into the series was the Knicks probably win, but I can't justify the Knicks being a -240, 250, 260 favorite against the Pacers. I think that the two teams are closer to that. I bet on the Pacers +6 in Game 1. That was probably sweatier than it needed to be, given how that end game played out. But I thought the Pacers were alive. Watching Game 1, I think the Pacers had really good process. They had a lot of open shots. They played really well. My biggest concern was offensive rebounding for the Knicks, which kind of it got worse as the game went on. And then also late game offense, which I think the Pacers kind of did okay down the stretch on offense. It wasn't necessarily Haliburton, but I still think they got like decent shots. Siakam kind of was onto something against OG. So I think the proof of concept is there for this to be a competitive series. I'm not going to say the Pacers are definitely going to win this series, but Kirk, what were your thoughts after that game, after the Knicks? I think we could call it, we don't talk about the rest, but they escaped Game 1 with a win. The Pacers probably should have won that game.
For sure. Yeah, so I said this yesterday, like, obviously now knowing the Knicks won Game 1, they're more likely to win the series. But if we had that data point as a game, but then the series was restarting, I actually think I would favor the Pacers more in the series. I think the Pacers were really solid. I was pretty wary of the Pacers coming into the series. I think +6 and series were good bets. But I just, the Knicks are a team that beat you up. They love offensive rebounding. And Miles Turner's a horrible rebounding center. Pacers in general are, for lack of a better term, a bit of a soft team. So I was a bit worried about that. But yeah, I think their thesis is, okay, you're going to go for offensive rebounds. Anytime you have your center under the net, we're going to fly down the court and try scoring as fast as possible when we get that defensive rebound. And I think that's kind of the question of the series. Can the Pacers keep the Knicks to what it was last night, or 2 nights ago, 33% offensive rebound rate, and then the Pacers really punish them when they get the defensive rebounds? Or can the Knicks get, to like the ridiculous 36, 40% offensive rebound rate and just really bully the Pacers? But I think the Pacers are totally live in this series. As much as we just crapped on Halliburton, I think he will be better. And I think even if he's not really doing that much on ball, he's still a pretty lethal shooter. So they should be able to figure it out to get it to where he's still very additive. Like, it's not like when Halliburton's struggling, he should be a non-additive player. Obviously, I think they will go at him defensively. And then I think the other main question is what do they do on Brunson? They matched him up with Nesmith, Nemhart, and McConnell actually got a lot of run on him. I don't know if this was super true in the Sixers series, but you got to think like you now see Halliburton. Not Halliburton, Brunson. You see him. You felt it. You see what he's kind of trying to do. Maybe get a little more used to that foul drawing. I think if I'm the Pacers, if Halliburton wants to go 15 of 26 and he does that with 5 free throws, I'm okay with that. But I think he was 14 of 14 last game. You just cannot have that. Just don't foul him. As clearly it's way harder than it looks, but just don't foul him. I think those are kind of the key questions of the series. But I definitely think the Pacers are very live.
Yeah. What I noticed, first of all, so the Pacers defense, they don't send help, which I think Rick Carlisle saying, okay, if Jalen Brunson's going to score 40 and we lose, like, so be it. Like, we're going to let him get his. We're going to try and shut down everybody else. Knicks only 23 3-point attempts in game 1, but they shot 47%. So obviously, you got to hope to find your level there. But pretty much up until like late in the game, it was just one-on-one for Brunson. And sure, he cooked. I understand that. Maybe like at a point, Siakam starts getting some run on him. But I think the Pacers are saying, let Brunson keep up the sky-high usage. Let him gas himself out. Maybe they just don't gas out. But I do wonder, and why I think game 1 was so important for the Pacers, I do think the longer this series goes, like, are the Knicks really going to do this where they just play basically 6 guys all series? Because now Robinson's out, so I guess you could say Precious can play, but that didn't go so well. So is it just going to be these 6 guys against 10 Indiana guys? And I think the Pacers have counters here. I don't know. I think a long series might end up favoring Indiana. Granted, the Knicks seem to just kind of like pull like this horseshoe out of their ass with their, late game situations.
Yeah. And the late game foul calling, it was horrible in this one.
Yeah.
I thought the screen was a terrible foul call. Like, fine, was borderline. I bet you when the NBA checks it, they'll say, oh, it was technically right, but I thought it was terrible. I agree with you. I think the minutes pretty clearly favor Indiana. They're going to be fresher as the series goes. Going back to Brunson, I think they probably want to double Brunson more because you look at what the Knicks are doing. They don't have, other than DiVincenzo, they don't have that much shooting on. You're kind of fine to have Hart shooting a bunch of threes. I think where the real problem stems, if you send 2, is that's when the Knicks start getting to those massive offensive rebound numbers. Because when you're scrambled, it's much harder to find your guy. So I agree. I think you go one-on-one with Brunson. Maybe someone covers him like I don't think we've seen this since Harden playing the Jazz in Houston. Maybe you cover him from behind. Like, just play on his hip and don't foul because he likes stepping back. He doesn't do that much at the rim. Obviously, Indiana doesn't like helping that much. So Turner, but it's not as though like Hardenstein's spacing them out or Precious is spacing them out. So yeah, it wouldn't shock me if they went to something like that. But yeah, I think you just need to somehow drill in not fouling Brunson. And I agree with you. I think the Pacers have a lot of counters. I think obviously playing more guys and being more fresh should help them. But yeah, they also really need to get this game too.
Yeah, obviously got to get game 2. Teams up 2-0 win 93% of the time, which is pretty wild. You'd think it's somewhat closer just because, series doesn't start till team wins on the road. But technically, actually, like if you just win both your games at home, you typically just win the series. One prop note, again, this is going to be dated because the game is going to happen already, but So Robinson's out, and I noticed Hardenstein's rebound prop went from 8.5 to 9.5 because people are probably assuming, or odds makers are assuming, that all the usage now is going to go to Robinson. OG Anunoby's rebound prop did not move, sitting at 6.5 still, was the same in the last game. I actually think he's the biggest benefactor. He had, where is it? Sorry. He had 15 rebound chances in game one. He's gone over it in the last handful of games also. So I think he's going to obviously keep playing 40 plus minutes. He had 9 rebounds in game one. I think he actually is the one who actually gets the bump, maybe a little bit more than Hardenstein. I know Hardenstein just gets more minutes, but Kirk, anything else on this game? I know we didn't want to go too long because a game will have happened and this might have all been just nonsense.
Yeah, I think the OG's a good look. I don't think they've done it much, but possible they start rolling them at center at some point.
Mm-hmm.
OG in the non-Hardenstein minutes, I've called for that. Maybe a little less important, but maybe you could switch everything. You're not really worried about the Pacers' size. So yeah, I could see OG playing a little bit of center. Precious has been like the on-court results with Precious have been horrible since he's been a Knick, but it seems like Tibbs likes him and Tibbs doesn't really care about that stuff. So,
and also he has nobody else to play. Like he's just like refusing to play anybody else. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, no, for sure. So yeah, I think that's a good look, but I think we mostly covered it. Those are kind of the big questions. The last thing I'd say is I think Nesmith is a better matchup than Nembhard. I just think you want more length so your body can be a little farther from him, because if your body's like tied to Brunson on any side, he's just gonna like decel and draw foul.
Yeah, no, Nesmith was another guy. He what was it, like 12, 6, and 2 or something, hit a few threes too, and he played good defense as well. Definitely seems to be one of the more like aggressive players on the Pacers, like guy who's like a little bit more flying around trying to like match the Knicks physicality. So Cavs Boston's the next game. Game 2 is going to be on Thursday night. Kirk, I don't know about you. I just don't have much to say about the series. I don't really, it's a walkover. So what I was going to ask you, because I know that you're big Celtics, you're heavy Celtics. We could talk about how long you've been in and everything, but given where the West is at right now, Boston's in the finals. Porzingis is back. He's good. He's healthy enough. The Celtics at relatively full strength. Who's the one team you don't want to see on the other side? Like the one where you'd be like, oh, that's like kind of annoying. I'd rather another one of the three. Imagine Denver can come back in this scenario too.
Yeah. Well, that was who I was going to say. Denver.
Oh, God.
Denver's like, I just think Denver causes the most problems for Boston. I don't think they have a supernatural matchup for Jokic. He's clearly caused them problems in both regular season matchups. The thing, I think teams clearly like this move of, putting a wing or not their main defender on Jokic and having kind of a rim protector behind him. But there's just not really a natural guy other than Horford to do that, right? Like you could put Horford on Jokic and have Kristaps behind him, but they don't start Horford. They don't love playing those two bigs. They don't like playing Horford that many minutes. So yeah, I think Denver is the biggest worry. I think Boston is going to beat any of these other three teams, if I'm being honest. Obviously, they have a chance. If I had to rank it, I probably would be most worried about Minnesota, just because maybe Minnesota is just actually this good. I think Minnesota right now is a bit overrated in the market. I think what we're seeing right now is a bit more, matchup with Denver, Murray hurt, but they also rode over Phoenix, to be fair. Yeah. But yeah, I don't think Minnesota should be minus 110 to come out of the West.
That's what I was thinking. I think, so we're going to talk about Mavs-Thunder after. Like, I like the Thunder before the series. I actually think the Thunder are a pretty tricky matchup for Minnesota. I know the size can maybe be an issue in the front court with Chet, but to me, I don't know. I think Boston would be able to take care of Minnesota or OKC, but I actually think OKC might be getting, and I didn't even look this morning, but I think like Minnesota moving to minus 110 to win the West felt like a pretty stark overreaction, given also, I mean, they're going to go to OKC. OKC, they have to be small favorite, and I guess they were only a small favorite against Dallas. But they assuming they win, they get a pretty big bump. But you can't make Minnesota a favorite in OKC, in my opinion.
Definitely not. Like I was pricing it yesterday as Minnesota's small favorites in the series, but what didn't feel right was it kind of like you said, if OKC beats Dallas, pretty likely they're going to be upgraded as well, and that didn't feel like they were getting any of that bump. Yeah, I think OKC is a really good matchup for Boston. Like, I think OKC is kind of a younger, worse version of Boston. Obviously, Shea would be the best player in that series, but OKC kind of operates small. They're smaller than Boston. I think Boston pretty clearly the biggest worry is size against them. You still are able to get Chet out of the paint, and they have really no supplemental rim protection without Chet, and they're pretty small at the wing positions. Dort obviously is like a pretty killer defender on the wing, but it's a pick your poison. Who do you put him on? Tatum? Okay, well then they still have four other creators pretty easily. So yeah, I think OKC's a pretty big, or Boston's a pretty big problem for OKC. But I agree with you. I think OKC's definitely a problem for Minnesota. Gobert, pretty obviously, his biggest flaw has been spacing him out in the playoffs. I think that storyline did get a bit overrated in Utah, as we've seen this year, as he's been amazing, but still he becomes less effective if he can't just sit in the paint. And then not really a natural matchup for Cat. I guess he covers Dort, but they could pretty easily go after him with Shea, with J Dub. So yeah, I think I like OKC as a matchup for Minnesota. And I've had OKC slightly better than Minnesota for most of the year, and OKC hasn't lost a playoff game yet, and they've blown out pretty much every game they've played. So I don't know. I don't see why OKC is now priced in the market as like way worse than Minnesota. Obviously, these have been impressive wins for Minnesota, but I think a lot of that has been matchup plus Murray injury.
So Boston right now, they're minus 130, Fields plus 105. That's like an actual offering at FanDuel. Do you think it's still plus EV to bet Boston to win it all?
No, not a minus 130. They were like plus 105 yesterday, and I said that was good. I think like right now they're probably like minus 115, maybe even a little more, maybe minus 120. But I wouldn't play minus 130 right now, just because that just doesn't really factor in. Maybe someone on Boston gets hurt in this series, and then they're playing the Knicks down two starters. They still would be massive favorites, but I don't think I could justify minus 130 with Kristaps out. Yeah. But I think it just shows that how ridiculously good Boston is, that this is where the prices come to.
Yeah, and then my last question on Boston. So just again, simulating it out, Boston wins it all, right? They're just that much better than everybody. It is what it is. Like, does Tatum just win Finals MVP, or the boy who was kissed by God, Derek White, wins Finals MVP? like how do you where? I guess obviously you need to know who the opponent is, but how do you see this going for Boston on this Finals run? Where can you extract is some futures value? Whereas it feels like in the past, the NBA Finals MVP is the best player on the best team. Obviously, there's some outliers, but for the most part, that's kind of the trend it follows. Jamal Murray played out of his mind last year. He wasn't even in consideration. Jokic was just going to win Finals MVP. That's just how it was. So, is there a scenario where you think Tatum's actually that good? Because if you look back at, and I know, again, we're doing game one of the second round against the Cavs, but the Celtics were basically in cruise control the entire game. They absolutely dispose of the Cavs, but Tatum only goes 18, 11, and 5. Great game, but Jalen pours in 32. Derek White shoots 7 and 12 from 3. Do you think that maybe if you like the Celtics, is it worth maybe throwing some darts elsewhere?
Yeah, I actually think that's a great point that I've already bet, actually. Unfortunately, I bet pre-playoffs. I wasn't able to get much on this at all, but pre-playoffs, I bet Kristaps, Western Conference MVP. Or sorry, not Western Conference. Eastern Conference MVP and Finals MVP. I think Kristaps. I'm trying to find a market for this right now. I bet you Kristaps.
I got you. I can read you the Celtics, guys. I just think it's an interesting conversation because I think the rub with the Celtics and why people are a little slow. Obviously, we're at this point now, but haven't been able to crown them is obviously what happened last year. But also that people, I think, don't feel that way about Tatum as that singular great guy that typically wins the finals, whereas the rest of the team is amazing. So maybe it manifests itself in the Finals MVP market where Tatum is plus 130. I'm just going to read the Celtics, guys. Tatum's plus 130. Jalen's 11-1. White's 19-1. Porzingis is 30-1. Drew Holiday is 180-1. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's all that's listed. No painted picture left here.
I think those last three, Drew's may be tough, but there has been precedent of giving it to the guy who kind of locks up the best player. You could see if Drew's the thing is, I don't think Drew would be the Shea matchup. That's a problem. I don't think he would be, or the Ant matchup. So I don't think Drew's going to win, but yeah, I honestly probably would bet Drew 180, White 30, or what was White, 26?
White is where to go? 19-1.
Yeah,
but this is a FanDuel, so if you shop around, I'm sure you could find like
White 19, Kristaps. Yeah, I like that Kristaps line a lot. I think Kristaps has a pretty good argument to be the second best player on this team. I think he could be really good in specific finals matchups. If they play Minnesota, he's probably getting Gobert as the matchup. They might let him shoot a lot of threes. Tatum just not that. I agree with you completely. The reason the market, or maybe not the market, the reason in people's heads is, this Boston team isn't, an obvious finals pick, is because Tatum's not, the best player in the league. But we've never really seen a team that has so much talent surrounding also very good players. They all fit perfectly together. They're all good defensive players, and they all can shoot. So, yeah, I think Tatum plus one. Tatum's just not nearly like that superior of a player to these other guys. And Jaylen Brown, is Jaylen Brown a better player than Derek White at this point? Probably not. Is Jaylen Brown a better player than Kristaps at this point? Probably not. They're all very close. So yeah, I think I probably would bet that, honestly.
Yeah, like maybe like sprinkle out across, like spread a unit across those 3 or 4 and hope that, basically one takes down Tatum.
I honestly don't even think I'd bet Brown. I think I would just bet White and Kristaps and maybe a tiny bit on Drew at 180. Yeah, I think I just don't really think Jaylen is like, I don't really think there's much reason for Jaylen to be a bigger favorite than those two either. Oh, but this is what I was going to say. I think you're also getting a really big discount on Kristaps because of the injury.
Yes.
But the final starts June 9th or June 10th. It'll be 5 weeks from Kristaps' injury. That's more time than Giannis to this moment right now. His injury. So like it would be like an additional week from now from Giannis' injury. So it's a lot of time. I think Kristaps probably maybe doesn't play in the Eastern Conference Finals because they probably don't think they need him. But if it gets really close, Game 4, Game 5, he'll probably be back. I think he should be pretty much full strength for the finals. I wouldn't be too worried about that.
Yeah, it's a great look. So game last night, Thunder Mavs got competitive for Thunder in control for most of it. Mavs going to run. Thunder end up blowing their doors off. They win big. I said it before, I liked the Thunder before the series. Market now moving towards OKC. They're 5-point favorites in game 2. Total, I believe, is around the same. I think it closed 219. It's about like 218.5, so very similar. Kirk, where were you before this series? Any takeaways from game 1 that surprised you, that reaffirmed your belief? And how do you see this series playing out?
Yeah, so I have OKC. So I was, to be fair, on Dallas Western to win the West pre-playoffs when it looked like Kawhi's knee was a bit bugged. But yeah, I took OKC series. I took OKC last night, and I took OKC to win the West yesterday as well. I think OKC's a better team than Dallas. They're at home. Luka's clearly not right. Not right. He was hurting early in the game as well. And he re-injures himself so often as well. He hasn't been healthy for like 2 years. So yeah, I think OKC is pretty clearly the superior team. I don't know if I would bet it right now, but I like OKC. I think game 2 is honestly not a bad bet at -5. I haven't taken any of it yet, but Luka, it's really a tight window for him to look better at all. So I know there is some zigzag, and now the spread's actually more than it closed yesterday. So that's a bit of a tough look and kind of why I'm off of it. But they blew him out, and Luka didn't look good at all. So I definitely favor OKC in this series, and I think OKC, even to win the West right now, is probably pretty decent bet. The problem with OKC is that if Denver can come back and win this series, which I think people are maybe disregarding a bit too much, is I think that's a horrible matchup. I don't think OKC is beating Denver.
Yeah. I was Thunder pre-series. I this was my biggest series bet. FanDuel opened plus 104. There was like minus 110 out there for a little bit. Like that. To me, there the Thunder needed a little bit more respect. And I also thought just you do simple math, and I'm not like a super geeky math guy, but if the Thunder are favored by 3.5, 4 in game one, that means that they're power rated better. So why are they only like marginal, if any, favorite over down? Like it made no sense to me in my head. So that reaffirmed my belief. And then watching the game play out, I guess I didn't know Luka would look that poor, but you also saw OKC just had so many, similar to the Pacers idea against the Knicks, where it's kind of like the volume of players, the depth of the team is really going to showcase. I think that's going to showcase against Dallas, where OKC just has so many guys. Okay, you have Dort, who's arguably the best perimeter defender in the league. Okay, he goes out. Okay, you're bringing in who? Kason Wallace, who's a little bit smaller, but he could check him. Aaron Wiggins. Like you just have so many guys that could just switch and play onto Luka. Made life hell for him. 6 for 19, 19 points for Luka. I think for Dallas to get going, need Kyrie to be a lot more aggressive and try and take on more of a scoring role and maybe give Luka some time, like a few possessions off. Like I don't think Luka's going to thrive in this high 30s, 40% usage. I think it's going to Kyrie's going to have to be more of a 1A, 1B instead of a 1-2 punch, because I think they're really going to struggle, Dallas, to generate sound looks. And I just felt like OKC, it was a bit of a lull early on, but it felt like OKC, the process was there and much easier for them, especially with Chet able to play both inside and out.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think a huge problem for Dallas in this series is, well, I think Dallas's roster's construction's not great. Pretty much every player on their team is like, you would look at them as a one-way player, right? Luka, Kyrie, both pretty one-way offensive guys. Gafford, also not a really good defensive player. Derek White, pretty obviously a zero on offense. He's been shooting a bit better, but just not. Did I say Derek White? Derek Jones.
Yeah, Derek Jones. I didn't want to
Derek
interrupt.
Jones. Tim Hardaway off the bench, obviously a one-way guy. Even Dante Exum, really not much of an offensive player. Maybe you could make an argument that he's a bit of a two-way guy. They lost Maxi Kleber, who people love to hate on, but pretty good player. I like Maxi Kleber.
And now he's out though, which is a pretty impactful here.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. They lost him for the series, and they played him a ton. He's their only big who could shoot and space him out. And they also just Luka and Kyrie are players, especially Luka, that OKC is just going to go after. OKC just doesn't have that. Shea is an above-average defensive player. I don't think he's a great one-on-one defender, but he really is a good help defender and a guy who causes chaos. And Jalen Williams is a big guy who's a good defender. There's no one really to go at other than Giddey. And OKC can just take Giddey off the floor. It's not like you can take Luka off the floor if OKC's going after him with Shea every time. And then especially with the injury, Luka doesn't look like he's in the best shape either. It's going to be tiring on him. So yeah, I just think OKC has a lot more buttons to press. I don't think Dallas really has anything to go to other than hope, Luka gets a bit healthier and can dominate.
And yeah, I don't even know what the schedule to this series is, but I know obviously only one day off, the typical, every other day for game one and game two. So, I mean, I don't know how you could confidently say, oh yeah, Luka will just be healthier. They get 2 days off before game three. No, that's not right. Game 1, 2, 3. Before game 5, they get some more time off. So it's going to be every other day for a little bit here. So I think Dallas is kind of up against it much quicker than I think many had expected. And look, I mean, Luke is an unbelievable player. He could go off for 40 tomorrow night or tonight when you're listening to this. But I just think OKC is a lot more to throw at them. And again, like you mentioned, Josh Giddey, I mean, I played his under points, rebounds, and assists, a cheap 17.5. I think Daigneault has shown pretty early on here in the postseason that he's comfortable pulling guys and making adjustments and drawing up good pet sets. I've liked what I've seen from him in the small sample size. I don't really trust Jason Kidd to really scheme one up here. It's kind of like, okay, Luka, save us, or Kyrie, save us. So I think Dallas is up against it. And, it's nice to get an early return there with OKC game one and just how the series is playing out.
Yeah, I agree. I think Kidd's been fine in the playoffs, but Daigneault's pretty clearly a different level of coach. Yeah, I just think he's a much better coach, and he has more players to work with. So yeah, I think I was kind of stunned by the OKC price early. I was just very
Yeah.
confused by it. It ended up taking some steam. I guess, OKC's pretty young. I think the market was maybe a bit worried about playoff experience, which I do think matters, but I also just think they're the better team at home. So they're probably going to win this series, I think. And last night showed kind of exactly what I thought. They were just clearly better all night, but I don't think this series is over. But
Oh
if
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm the Pacers, I'm a lot more confident in how I looked in game one than if I'm Dallas. If I'm Dallas, I'm a bit worried for sure.
Yeah. Just some like other like observations I had from game one. Jalen Williams. So this was a bet I made, Kirk, and I guess I'll take your opinion on it. Jalen Williams was 60-1 to win Western Conference Finals MVP before I bet this on Monday. So before the series started. It's kind of a slow game. My idea on it was, okay, if it's going to be Minnesota, I kind of like OKC in that game. Shea probably wins, but J-Dub also I could kind of play the market. But I think Jalen Williams, underrated playmaker, could take over games like he did in the second half, kind of. I like his facilitating as well. Both him and Shea assist overs. It seems like the two of them are kind of sharing the ball a little bit more, both handling the rock. But yeah, that was a bet I made. I'm a big Jalen Williams guy. And I think Shea is obviously the best player, but again, we've seen also conference finals MVP get a little bit more skewed depending on the player. And maybe if Jalen Williams has, if they're going to put Jaden McDaniels on Shea, does that mean Jalen Williams starts averaging closer to 25 points and maybe it's a little bit closer to that? So that was a bet I made also. Again, it's like a long shot flyer price, but yeah.
No, sounds like a pretty good number, honestly. Clearly they're second best guy. I guess Chet also is just really good, but Chet, I'm looking on 365 right now. He's actually priced higher than Jalen Williams, right?
Yeah, that's what I was like.
I think it's
tough for
pretty
Chet to win with that
unlikely Chet wins.
usage.
Yeah, he just won't put up those stats. But I guess he has been ridiculous around the rim. And if he shut that off against Minnesota, maybe he has a chance. But yeah, it seems pretty good. I think people these markets tend to overrate the best guys. Like Anthony Edwards right now is 2.1 or plus 110. Like obviously, I think if Minnesota wins, it'll probably be Anthony Edwards. But I think the gap between Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert is closer than people think. I don't think they're similar, but Minnesota was the 16th best offense this year and the best defense in the league. Anthony Edwards pretty clearly is their top offensive guy. Gobert is pretty clearly their best defensive guy. Obviously, that's a little bit reductive, but I think Anthony Edwards, his season this year wasn't completely insane. He's playing in a bit of a tougher spot, but he wasn't like some efficiency god. I could definitely see paths where Rudy would win Western Conference MVP. People forget Cody Martin was like a minus 200 favorite at a point to win.
Yeah.
Maybe minus 150 to win Eastern Conference MVP last year on Miami. So like it's not as though this is something that always the best player wins. It's obviously pretty common, but yeah, I think some long shots there are probably hold some value.
Yeah. So it was a good segue though, talking Anthony Edwards. We can talk Nuggets, Wolves, then we'll get out of here. 2-0 Wolves are now minus 700. We kind of have been like dancing around the idea that, the Wolves are this potential sleeping giant. I think we both see eye to eye. Maybe a cart a little bit before the horse, but I will say I've been very impressed. And they're obviously, I think Anthony Edwards has the highest Q rating like a human being can possibly. I don't know a person that hates Anthony Edwards. Forget like if you're just like you're betting on Minnesota or not. Just I think everyone is infatuated with him. So credit to Anthony Edwards taking the world by storm like this. But I feel like, Kirk, you've been kind of saying you're not writing off Denver just yet. You think that there might be something brewing here? Maybe not like it's going to happen, but you think like it's not over just yet.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's like Minnesota's 4.5 point favorites in Minnesota. It's a good price. Definitely an upgrade. I think Murray's calf is a huge issue for Denver, but they're minus 4.5. I'll check money line price. Viglis is like minus 173. Denver wins game 3. This series is far from over. Obviously, that's pretty easy logic. Obviously, if you give the conditional that they now go to 2-1, it's way more likely they win the series. But yeah, I don't think it's completely over. I think Minnesota's being a bit overrated. I think the huge problem is Denver, kind of opposite team to Boston in terms of Boston's really good everywhere. They can shift up lineups. They can play two bigs. They can play five out. They pretty much only play five out, but they can play inside out. They can play a drive and kick game. They can shoot a ton of threes. Denver's not really like that. Denver has a fastball. They have one thing to go to, that starting lineup. They have absolutely nothing off the bench that they can adjust to. Obviously, they could play a bit of a different style. They could focus more on Jokic in the post. They could go more dribble handoffs, more high pick and roll. But I think the big problem is that once you take out anything of that starting lineup and maybe make it a little worse, they go down way faster than even Boston, missing Kristaps. They kind of don't miss a beat, even though Kristaps is such a good player. So I think that's a huge problem for Denver. I definitely think Minnesota's going to win the series. I think it's maybe a little less over, but it's not like I've been betting Denver to win the series. Yeah. But yeah, I just think Minnesota's gone a bit overrated in the market. I also think they're specifically really good matchup for Denver, especially with Murray being hurt. And they've also, credit to them, they've done a lot of things that have been absolutely awesome. They haven't let players dribble the ball up the court. They cover them full court, make it so hard on them. Murray's so frustrated. Denver completely lost their cool in game 2. Even Jokic, they pressure up full court. Aaron Gordon, they're pressuring up full court. Murray, when they do it, is the worst because he's clearly hurt. He's clearly a bit fatigued, and he gets really annoyed when they do it, and it's clearly taxing them. But yeah, Denver's a really good team. They won the championship last year. I think that, it's maybe being written off a little early here.
Yeah. I kind of kicking myself because I saw when Denver lost to San Antonio, I remember texting friends okay, if Denver doesn't win it all, I think this was the night where they lost it. This was the issue for them because I knew in my heart of hearts that Minnesota was probably the worst matchup for them with their ability to throw size on Jokic, to have length on the perimeter, and that they don't really have an answer for a guy like Edwards. And I didn't play it real. I had Denver tied to some other futures like UConn that enhanced the payout. So kind of kicking myself that I wasn't more aggressive in playing my thought and my observation. I kind of had a analysis paralysis. But I think where Denver is getting cooked, and this is kind of a more broad NBA conversation we don't have to get to into that because this could take a while, but the CBA and the Denver's goal of thinking more long-term and that all right, maybe we're not going to bring back Bruce Brown, go closer to the second apron. We're going to hope that Christian Braun and Peyton Watson are going to develop a little bit more, and we can maybe get Julian Strawther to hit maybe a little bit earlier than expected. I think those things just not coming to fruition. Like you said, if you take one piece of that 5 out, and their 5 is really damn good. I think it was the best in the league, maybe besides Boston. When you pull one lever, it all falls apart. And I think in a credit to Minnesota, they've been speeding up Jokic. I've never, I can't remember seeing it was the second quarter where he just caught it in transition and he turned and he missed Gordon, just threw it out of bounds immediately. And you could see because there were swarms of wolves literally everywhere. And I felt that was kind of I was damn, they are just running Jokic wild here. So credit to Minnesota. And now you got to go on the road for Denver. Yeah, it's probably cooked. We'll see. I do wonder, Minnesota, I don't know what their effective field goal percentage was in the first 2 games, but it felt like Minnesota was shooting the shit out of the ball compared to Denver. So maybe you get some regression on offense because Minnesota's defense has been playing lights out, obviously. But if you're shooting, if Naz Reid's going to keep, my boy Naz Reid, 6-man, if he's going to keep shooting, over 50% from 3, Nickeil Alexander-Walker's going to can 4 threes, yeah, you're in big trouble against anybody.
For sure. And I think there are a lot of broad kind of NBA reasons why Denver was maybe a bit overrated. I think fans are pretty used to, a team wins the championship, they have the best player in the league. Oh, okay, well then next year they're probably going to win the championship again. That's what we've seen for years, how many straight finals of Golden State, Cleveland did we have? Miami was in the finals 4 straight years. San Antonio before that, Lakers before that. I just think we've hit a bit of a different parity level in the NBA. I never really bought in that Denver was anywhere close to those teams of the past. They never dominated the regular season like those teams. And look, at the end of the day, Jamal Murray's really good and really good in the playoffs. He's never made an All-Star team. Like
Yeah.
this team isn't some loaded juggernaut that was clearly destined for the playoffs. And as much as when I talk on Twitter and people are shocked by when I was kind of criticizing Denver, the market knew this. Like, you could have bet Denver to not make the finals at around even odds.
Yeah.
Pre-playoffs. Like, they just were never that much better than these other teams in the West. And yeah, Minnesota pretty much built their team to beat Denver. They got Denver's GM. They traded for Gobert. They're the biggest team in the league. Like, they're designed to beat Denver. I'm not saying it was super obvious that they were going to beat Denver, but if Denver's a 70% favorite in 3 series, that's under 50%. I think, if my math is right. So yeah, I just kind of think that Denver, from the general perception, was pretty overrated for a while. So I don't look at this as some shock. And Minnesota was plus 170 to win this series. Like, it's not like we're talking about some Cleveland beating Boston. It was a totally reasonable result. But yeah, I also, after saying all that, I wouldn't write off Denver. They get a bit of treatment in Jamal's leg. They win 1 game. This is a series.
Well, that's the other thing I was going to say. They played Monday. They're not playing until Friday because this series got started so much earlier than every other one. So if there was a game that you get like Jamal Murray's best, probably it's going to be game 3 because he had so much treatment done on his calf. And, you also, this is not quantifiable. This is just like my stupid, probably idiot opinion, but you got the defending champ sitting there for like 5 days now, getting just absolutely flamed. Like, maybe they roll over and maybe they don't care, but I think there is some like level of like, self-worth and pride that like, okay, we're going to go down a little bit more fierce here. We're not going to get punched around like we did in game 2. Also, so Minnesota over 58% effective field goal percentage through the first 2 games. That would be the best in the NBA in the regular season. Better than the
No doubt they've been shooting the ball really well. And also to that point, as much as it's qualitative and Denver is going to show up for game 3. Someone also messaged me this point, which I thought was pretty interesting. Maybe not, I don't fully buy into it, but Denver was preparing for Gobert adjustments, and then they didn't get Gobert. Obviously, that doesn't mean that Minnesota's better without Gobert or was worse that Gobert didn't play. But the zigzag factor of, okay, we're going to adjust kind of was taken away a little bit by the fact that Gobert didn't play, and then they had to completely change that game plan. And they only found out like 30 minutes before game time. And Minnesota probably knew the whole day that Gobert wasn't playing, and they probably were ready for it. So
yeah,
I think they will have some adjustments for no Gobert. And if Murray's leg's better, I think Denver. Here's my prediction. I'll go on record. I think this is going to be a series. I don't think Minnesota's going to win this in 4, maybe not even 5. I think we could easily see this going 6. So yeah, I think this is going to be a series.
I had the tweet up of like teams, because obviously typically if you go down 0-2, and I said 93%, I could pull it up, but 93% of series that are 2-0, the team that's up 2-0 wins. But where is it? Okay. So teams, this is from George Sedano from ESPN. Teams trailing 0-2 and going on the road, like the Nuggets, are 5-24 when excluding the 2020 bubble. The wins were the 21 Clippers against the Mavericks, the 2017 Celtics against the Bulls, the 05 Mavericks against the Rockets, 94 Rockets against the Suns, and the 69 Lakers, as me and you both recall very fondly, against the Warriors in 69. So, and which is interesting because it's only 7%. More of those comebacks have actually come from the teams down 0-2, because you would think logically those teams that lose at home, they're better than the team that was down, like the Pacers, for example. So like they're actually better equipped to come back relative to the worst team. So an interesting point. But Kirk, you've been gracious with your time. I appreciate it. Any other bets, opinions, observations that we didn't hit on that you want to share, or plug your work? This is your time.
Yeah, I don't have so much work to plug. I do a podcast on the board, but with the NBA season winding down, we haven't been doing it quite as much of late. But yeah, follow me on Twitter if you want. But overall, general points, I think we got to everything.
Awesome, man. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Reed Wallach, the bet stamp at RW33. And yeah, Kirk, appreciate it. Enjoy the games, and we'll talk to you next week.